Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Welcome to the fourth episode in my GM 101 series, in which I will answer the question, how do I become a Game Master? Today, I set off again on the Obsidian Monolith to respond to your feedback and do my best to answer your questions about game mastering. So join me on the journey. Together, we can become Game Masters, truly worthy of the title. Hello, listener. Greetings, fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 78 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and I'm transmitting to you from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside time and space. So, as you might have noticed, there were some surprises for you in the podcast feed last week. I managed to get out all of the episodes for the first session of my new Primordia campaign. So, as I'm sure you know by now, I'm doing actual play episodes for this podcast of that campaign and putting them in the feed for you. So, I hope you're enjoying those. Today, I thought I would get back to my GM 101 topic, and I got some more feedback from you that I want to discuss and some more questions. But before I get into the GM 101 stuff, I want to send out a huge shout out and thank you to my tier 5 patron, Mr. Steve Strickland. Let's hear it for Steve. Yeah. Woo! Go Steve.
Yes.
He's the man. And I want to thank all of my patrons for your support and everyone who donates on the website, everyone who uses my Amazon referral link, everyone who gets Audible books, trials from Star Walker Studios. I really appreciate it. And I also really appreciate people who leave reviews for the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And I just got an excellent 5-star review from SteerPike65 in Ireland. So I want to thank SteerPike65 for your review. So awesome that this show is being listened to in Ireland. That is so cool. And the review says, Game Master's Journey is, for me, the best of the range of podcasts available for GM advice. Sound quality is generally top-notch, a wide range of topics are covered, and Lex himself is both humble, thoughtful, and articulate in his opinions. Well, thank you, although I don't feel really humble reading this review. SteerPike65 continues, he's invited interesting guests to provide a counterpoint to his own thoughts and advice during the series. Best of all, he has run a series on world building and encounter design, followed by actual play episodes on both the podcast and on YouTube to show how his world and encounters turned out in real play. All gold for the aspiring game master. So thank you very much for that review, SteerPike65. I really appreciate it. And again, just so awesome that I have at least one listener in Ireland. That is so cool. You know, just a little tidbit you might find interesting. I don't know. I was looking the other day at the heat map for my downloads and kind of, you know, where you all are in the world. And probably not surprisingly, the majority of my downloads do come from the United States. But some of the hot spots after the US are Canada, Australia, and Germany. How cool is that? So cool. Canada and Australia don't surprise me. I know a lot of gamers in both Canada and Australia, and, you know, for the most part, they're English-speaking places. So, you know, that makes sense. But I was really surprised to see that I have so many listeners in Germany. So, you know, these people are listening to a podcast in a second language, which is so cool. And I know in Germany, probably pretty much everybody knows English because unlike here in the US, people are educated. But that's still really, really cool. So shout out to all the listeners in Germany. So awesome. All right, so this is going to be mainly another feedback episode. I've gotten quite a bit of feedback again about the GM 101 stuff. So first I got an email from DM Nell, which I'm sure you recognize DM Nell's name by now, a friend of the show and has sent feedback in quite a few times. So he is responding to Sophia's question that I talked about in a previous episode. And he says that he's found the amount of railroading that a DM can get away with is directly correlated to the experience of the players. Now, this is interesting. DM Nell says, if the players are new, railroading them through a published adventure is probably the preferred method of playing to get them to understand the game, rules, what's expected of them, etc. Setting new players loose in a sandbox is not good for them or for a new GM in my experience. I completely agree with that. I've actually never tried to run a sandbox for new players, and I've never as a new player played in one myself, so I don't have direct experience with this, but it makes perfect sense with what I've seen as both a GM and a player. DM now continues. Also, even some experienced players like some amount of railroading. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. My group dislikes completely open-ended games. They like to have their options laid out clearly and choose from them. For example, you can go to the mines to investigate the rumors of cult activities. You can go south to the garrison from which a call for aid has been received, or you can clear out the observatory in town that is infested with undead. You are still giving them options, even though each option is a clearly defined adventure that you are prepared to run. Even then, players can say, screw those, we're going to Greyhawk to sell the loot from our last adventure. That's what happened to me in my current Age of Worms campaign. I think railroading gets a bad rap because when done to the extreme, it takes player decisions out of the game completely, but when done properly, it can keep the game moving, allowing the DM to do some good prep work, especially if you are like me and like to prepare maps, miniatures, props, etc., while giving the players the illusion of complete freedom. Yeah, I completely agree with all of that, DM Now. Thanks so much for writing in. Those are really good points. Eventually, in these GM 101 episodes, when I get through all the feedback and I get back to my little syllabus, I'm going to talk a bit about, what kind of adventures I would recommend starting out as a GM. But I completely agree with DM Now, and this is kind of a spoiler or a foreshadowing of that later discussion. I would not recommend running a sandbox adventure as a new GM. Definitely not for your first go. And I also, like DM Now, I would not recommend running a sandbox adventure for new players. I personally, as a player, I don't like sandbox adventures. I find them boring. I find them lacking in direction. I find them narcissistic. Is that the right word? It's just, I don't know. There's this thing in gaming lately, and there's tons of articles online if you want to go down this rabbit hole about how much player agency players should have and blah 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 blah, and some people think that we're taking power from the GM, which is bad, and some people think we're giving power to the players, which is good. And there are people with very strong opinions on all sides of this, but personally, I'm not a fan of a lot of this new lovey-dovey, let's make the players feel comfortable and welcome and like they're in control of everything, and let's let them control everything, because honestly, that's not fun. That's mutual masturbation. That's not a game. Most of us, or at least I personally, I guess I shouldn't speak for other people, but I personally come to the table to play a game. Right? I don't come to the table to make a circle of back rubs and let's make everybody feel really good about themselves and, sing kumbaya. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for a game. I'm here for a role-playing experience. I'm here to be challenged mentally and maybe even emotionally by the story and by the decisions I have to make and by the consequences of those decisions. And take all that away, and I don't know exactly what it is anymore, but it's not a game, and for me, it's not fun. And, part of that I feel like is the story. I've used the analogy before. I'm not sure if I've used it on the show or not of, to me, trying to run an adventure that's a full sandbox with no story at all presented by the GM would be like watching a movie that has no story. It's just you're following a character in their everyday life and nothing interesting is happening. It's like no one would watch that movie. It would be so boring. As I was getting ready to record this morning, I thought of an even better analogy. And this is something that works great for me, who's mainly a GM and maybe doesn't play a whole lot, is if you play video games, especially if you play RPG video games, you see the same thing in video games, right? So recently I've been playing Fallout 4, and bear with me, this is going to be relevant, I promise. I've been playing Fallout 4, which, according to everybody on Twitter and whatnot, it's just this awesome, phenomenal game that everybody has to play. And, I've sunk quite a few hours into it, but honestly, I don't think it's all that. I think it's way overhyped. And the main reason I've played it so much is I just don't have anything better to play right now, except for Witcher 3, which I just need a break from because I've just played it so much. I just need to take a break from it. But the problem I have with Fallout 4 is, like a lot of, these RPG games these days, it's very open world, which is good. There are lots of side quests and things you can do, which is good. And you can kind of do your own thing and ignore the main story if you want, which is good. Okay, so this is all sounding very sandboxy, right? If we're going to compare this to like a tabletop RPG. But the problem I have with the game is the story, the central story of the game that's kind of like this thread that's supposed to take you through the game kind of sucks. I'm completely unengaged by it. I don't care about it. In fact, I have this whole list of quests, and consistently any quest involving the main story is the one I least want to do. But yet you kind of have to do it to progress through the game, right? Another example of this kind of thing done very badly is the new Batman Arkham Knight game. I didn't play the first Batman game. I really enjoyed Batman Arkham City though, and I was really excited to play Batman Arkham Knight, and I've been pretty much wholly disappointed with it. And again, it has the same problem. It's too much open world. There are too many different things to do, and the story that's supposed to lead you through the game is not strong enough, and it's drowned out by all this noise of all this extraneous stuff. So you're in the game and you just feel like there's no point to anything, and you feel like you're just doing the same things over and over, and it just seems aimless and pointless and meaningless, and therefore unfun. So, I think both of those you could compare to what you're going for when you're going for a full sandbox adventure in your tabletop RPG game. Now, on the flip side, a game that I think pulled this off really well is, as I just mentioned, Witcher 3. Now, Witcher 3 has open world, has lots of side quests and things you can do that have nothing to do with the main story, and you can spend way more time investigating that stuff than doing the main story if you want. However, where Witcher 3 got it right for me is the main story is really good. It's really interesting. It has fascinating characters. I'm looking forward to what happens next and finding out the next twist and everything. And I think, this is a great analogy for your tabletop RPGs. If you try to run an adventure, you can't even really call it an adventure, right? If you try to run game sessions where there's no story and it's all just sandbox and just whatever the players do is awesome, it's going to be like Batman Arkham Knight or like Fallout. It's going to seem kind of aimless and pointless and just not engaging. The players are not going to get into it as much as if you have some kind of interesting, evocative story that can suck the players in and give them a point to their existence as characters in the world and give them something to strive for and a goal to accomplish or an obstacle to overcome, right? And I think maybe another part of it might also be that a sandbox can oftentimes end up feeling very self-serving. It's like usually it seems like, in an RPG, if there's a story, it's usually kind of a heroic story, right? Like you're trying to help someone out, or you're trying to rid the world of an evil or something like that. So it's like there's like a purpose beyond just the selfish desires of your character or of the players, right? But if it's just a sandbox and the characters just do whatever the hell they want and there's nothing really coaxing them on to something else, then it's just, let's kill monsters and take their gold, and it's just empty. So, bringing this back around to advice for a new GM, a sandbox, I think theoretically it can be done. I've never seen it done well personally, but I think theoretically it can be done, or I should say done well. But I think if you find any good sandbox campaign that is done well, you're going to find that it's not really a sandbox. There's actually a story there. There's actually a plot that, it's just the GM is very good at making it seem like the story is just one of the many things that the players could be doing, and they just happen to choose that thing, right? And there's lots of ways you can do that as a GM. It's not terribly hard to do or to figure out, how to give players 3 options and make one of them seem a bit more attractive than the others, right? It's not hard to do. And that's the thing is, kind of what DM Nell was saying here is, really the trick isn't to try to make a sandbox adventure where there's no story and there's just this open world and the PCs just do whatever they want. I mean, you could try to do that, but I don't think ultimately you're going to have as much fun with it as if you had a story. So that's not the answer. The answer is to learn techniques to, first of all, hook your players into the story. If the players are interested in the story and they want to follow the story, they don't care that it's a story that the GM prepared. Just like when I'm playing Witcher 3, I don't care that this particular quest I'm doing is a quote-unquote story quest as opposed to a quote-unquote side quest. I don't care. All I care about is that it's fun and interesting and I want to know what happens next, right? It doesn't matter that it's a story quest. It doesn't matter that it's something that the GM actually prepared ahead of time and he's not pulling it out of his ass. In fact, it's probably going to be better because he's not pulling it out of his ass, right? So, the trick is to make the story interesting and hook the players into it. And, a great way to do that is by making it personal to the player characters, by tying it into their backgrounds or having it involve someone that matters to them. So, if a player has, as part of their character's background, they've really developed their character's sister and how she's a really important part of their life, and your hook to get the story going is someone's going to be kidnapped and the players are going to be asked to find the kidnapper, we'll have the person kidnapped be that player's character's sister. Now at least one of the characters is they're in, right? You've got buy-in from one player at least because, this character cares about his sister and she's been kidnapped. So, that's one way. And another way is to make the story interesting and to give it high stakes. And, by high stakes, you don't have to go all the way to the moon and say, the fate of the entire world rests on your character's shoulders, because that's really cliched and it's really, I don't know. I think in a way it's kind of unfun. I mean, we all want to do that, right? We all want to do the Lord of the Rings, like you're saving the world, but one part of that is, I was running Tyranny of Dragons, which is very much a save the world classic thing. And the problem with that is you get buy-in from the players, but it's almost too much buy-in because then they feel like they don't have any breathing room. They feel like they don't have the freedom to have downtime or to pursue their own interests along the way because the stakes are so high that, why would this character ever take a break when, the world could end in the meantime, right? So, it's better, I think, to make it more focus on the characters and make it more personal, but not make it all or nothing. The world will end if you don't complete your quest, so that they can feel like they can take a break every once in a while or do something different. And, another thing you can do is, like DM Now said, is give your players options. If you have this story that you want to tell, don't make that the only thing they can do. You can either, kind of like what DM Now says, is give them different options of quests, right? Just like a video game. If you're playing an RPG, you go in to town and there's all these people that have quests for you, and you get to do whichever ones you want, whichever order you want. You can do that same kind of thing and say, hey, here's the quests that are available. And I've considered doing something like this with my Primordia campaigns, because I have my Adventurers Guild, which have bounties for monsters and whatnot that they need taken care of. And I could literally have a notice board with bounties on it, just like in The Witcher 3, and say, here are the 5 bounties on the board right now. Which one do you want to go after? Or do you want to do something else entirely, right? So that's one way. And then, one of those bounties would tie into your story, and you just hope that they pick that one eventually. And again, the way that you can help to make that happen is to make that one a bit more attractive than the others. Maybe it just sounds cooler, right? Or it involves a cool location that the PCs might want to check out. Or maybe it pays out more, right? Maybe most of these bounties are giving 100 gold piece reward, and this one gives 200 or even 500. Now, you want to be, a little careful, because, if you're too heavy-handed with that, the players will know what you're doing. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on your players. Good players understand. Well, good players have run a game at least once in their life, which is another reason that I encourage you to run a game if you haven't, just to try it. If nothing else, even if you decide it's not for you, it will make you a better player, because you'll understand kind of more where the GM's coming from, and you'll know ways to basically not be a dick to your GM, right? Which, if you've never GM'd, you may not realize that you're being a dick when you are. So, your players may realize, oh, well, this quest pays out more than the other quests. This must be the one the GM wants us to do, right? But if they're good players, that's okay, because they're actually going to go along with that, right? Because, it's a cooperative thing. Just as, the GM shouldn't call all the shots and play the characters for the players and make all the decisions for them, the players shouldn't be assholes and try to screw with the GM, or obstinately, refuse to follow the story where it leads, only for the reason that they want to screw with the GM, right? But you can be more subtle, and then, maybe the players don't catch on. Another way that you can do it, or in addition, either or, is you could have more than one of those quests lead to your story, or maybe all of them do. Now, I don't know about the all of them thing. We start getting into this hokey territory that I'm not a super fan of like, you have 3 doors to choose from. Which one do you choose? But secretly, we all know they all go to the same place. I hate that shit. That's lame. But that's like, I don't know. That's amateur, right? Right. We want to be pros. But what you can do is you could have more than, like, maybe a few of them. Maybe there's 5 quests, and maybe 2 or 3 of them directly tie in to this story that you want to tell. And if the players start out with one of the other ones, well, that's okay. You just let them do that, and then they come back to the notice board, and it's like, well, we've done one, we have 4 more. Every time the odds are greatly increased that they're going to pick one that leads to your main story. And in the meantime, they're getting to know their characters, they're building their resources, so it's all good. And yeah, I agree with DM Now. I think railroading gets a bad rap, mainly because of people who've done it badly. And honestly, I'm about to make a resolution not even to use that term anymore, because railroading is a very loaded term, right? That's a very negative term. That when you use the term railroading, it comes with the assumption that that's a bad thing that you shouldn't do. Maybe plot directed would be a better way, or plot driven adventures instead of railroading. Because you can have very plot-driven adventures without railroading your players, and that's what you should be striving for. There's this thing, I don't know why we do this, but as humans, we always have to go from one extreme to the other, right? So, we used to have these really super railroaded GMs and adventures, and we didn't like that. So now we got to go to the opposite extreme, which is pure open sandbox, which is just as bad, if not worse, than a super railroaded GM adventure. So you want to be in the middle. You want to find that sweet spot. Don't go to one extreme or the other. You want to find that sweet spot where there is a story, there is a plot, it's engaging, it's interesting, it's something the players will choose to do, but there are other things going on around them as well that they can choose to become involved in or not. Next up is a question I got by email from Garrett Higdon. Hope I said that right. Garrett says, "Hey, I'm a fellow GM and I am looking to start a campaign on Roll20. Thing is, I'm not very experienced looking for players in an online setting like Roll20. I watch your actual plays on D&D and I really like your players. So do I. So I thought that I'd email you and ask you how you managed to find players as good as that. I thought I heard you mention an application on an episode of Game Master's Journey. What kinds of questions did you include in it?" So this is a great question, and this is a question I've been asked many times. So, I replied to Garrett and I gave him an answer, but I wanted to talk about it on the show because I have been asked this question many times, and, it is a problem. If you've had any experience at all with Roll20 or really any other online place to try to find gamers, separating the wheat from the chaff can be really difficult. And it seems for every one decent player you get it like 10 morons, right? Or just people that just won't show up, or they're like children mentally or whatever, right? So when I started my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I didn't want to deal with that. I wanted good players. And part of it was because I was planning on streaming it, right? And you don't want dipshits in your stream, right? So my first piece of advice to you for finding good players on Roll20 or something like it is, first, you got to know what you're looking for. Think about, what do you want in a player? What's important to you? So for instance, for me, now some of this was because I was streaming, but I wanted someone with a good mic. I wanted someone with a decent webcam. I wanted someone who can play in a quiet environment without sirens all the time. Of course, now I have sirens all the time, but at the time I didn't. Without sirens all the time, without screaming babies or barking dogs or any other obnoxious sounds in the background, right? Or wives or mothers or children yelling at them during the game or demanding their attention, that kind of thing. So that was all kind of because I wanted to stream and record. But honestly, all those things, if you're going to play on Roll20, those are all good things to have anyway, because somebody with a shitty mic or no webcam is really distracting and can really eat up a lot of time in your game, as well as, people that have really noisy backgrounds. I mean, it's really obnoxious to listen to for 4 hours, listen to someone's baby screaming or something. So personally, I just avoid those players and I don't have to deal with it. So that's the first thing. Think about what you want from your players, what kind of players you want. Another thing that was really important to me is I wanted players who would actually interact with one another and me in between sessions. So I've played online and even in-person games where you get together, you game for the night, and then, for the week or 2 weeks or however long it is until you game again, you never hear from these people, right? It's like they drop off the planet, you don't hear from them until the next game night. And, you can't read people's minds, but me as a GM, I can only assume that they're not thinking about the game at all that whole time, And it's like, I want players who are engaged. I want players who in between sessions will actually think about the game and actually think about their characters. I want players who will occasionally email me or call me or text me and say, "Hey Lex, I want to do this thing with my character," or "Hey Lex, next session I want to do this," or because they're thinking about the game, they're thinking about the character in between sessions. That's what I want. So in an online thing like Roll20, I want players who are going to be on the forum in between sessions, interacting with each other and with me. I want players who are mature, who are adult, which doesn't necessarily having anything to do with how old they are, mentally adult, emotionally adult, players who can get along well with myself and the other players, players who can follow directions, players who have a certain level of intelligence. So once you know what you want, then you have to decide a way to find those players and separate them from all the other players that you don't want. So you see, for me personally, what I'm looking for buy-in from players. I'm looking for players that are going to give, right? Because as a GM, I do a lot of work preparing, and I don't want a player that just shows up and that's it, right? Fuck that. So, how do I get that? So what I did is on Roll20, they have a, looking for group forum where you make a post saying, I'm a GM, I'm wanting to put together a group, I want to run this campaign, and you give however much information you want. And then it's a forum post. So people can respond to that post in the thread, and or they can message you privately, right? So what I did is, first of all, my post was pretty freaking long, which was, I tend to be wordy anyway, you know that. And when I write, I tend to write a lot. But it was a conscious choice because that was the first test, right? Will you actually read this long post in its entirety? And the way to see if they pass that test is throughout this long post, I sprinkled questions that I wanted the players to answer. I found the post. So here's the post I made. And maybe I'll just read through it. I won't read through all of it because it's pretty long. But it's been over a year since I did this, so I'll kind of read through this and kind of point out things. So I say, I'm putting together a group to play a Tyranny of Dragons campaign for D&D 5th edition. This campaign will be a long-term campaign consisting of at least 15 levels of play. So right there, I'm telling people, I want people that can commit to, a long-term thing. We will play every week on Thursday. I put the times. So then I say, please do not apply until you've read this entire post. This is very important. I think whatever you do, you want to put that line in there towards the beginning. If you have had any experience with either of the modules, please do not apply. This includes running any of the modules, playing it, blah, 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 blah. Because I've had people on online games try to play my games and they know the module, and that's really annoying. And I talk about how I'm going to be doing it on Roll20. Okay. So I said I'll be streaming with play sessions and making them available on YouTube. Because of this, there are the following requirements. You must have a webcam. You must use a headset or earbuds to avoid echo, quiet environment. Okay, I already said all this. In addition to the above considerations, I also have the following requirements of my players. You must be able to consistently make game sessions at the scheduled time. If for some reason you can't make a particular session, you must give me as much notice as possible. And this is also like spelling things out like this. You want to do this. You want to spell things out, because then if you have a player that doesn't work out, like say you have a player that consistently is late or doesn't show up, you can say, well, in the thing that you read entirely, where I explained the campaign, I said, this is what's expected of you. You're not doing it, so you're out, and it's just a lot easier to boot someone if you have in writing the thing that they were supposed to do that they're not doing. You must show up on time. Players who are consistently late or absent will be replaced. You must be willing to participate on the campaign forum. We will have discussions in and out of character on these platforms between sessions. I want players who will actually participate. So, this was really important because I played and GM'd for online groups before where there are certain people that you just never hear from on the forums in between sessions. And I didn't want that. I want people that are actually going to be engaged and participating and interacting throughout the week, not just on game night. You must be willing to role play. This includes role playing your background, traits, blah, blah, blah. You must be willing to commit to a long-term campaign that will last for at least 15 levels of play. New players are welcome. And then I go into a bit of an introduction of the campaign, what to expect, kind of where I stand about character death, how character creation works. And then at the end, I say, if you are interested in applying for this game, please respond and let me know if you're available at the day and time as well. I was thinking about maybe doing a second day. So I was like, let me know if you're available on either or both days. Also, let me know what type of character you'd like to play. And the type isn't set in stone, just to give me an idea of what you're interested in. Also, tell me a bit about your role-playing history, what games you've played, what games you like, and what types of gameplay you like: combat, social interaction, investigation, exploration, etc. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm looking for 5 players. So that's my post. And maybe, this is public. Maybe I'll even put a link to this if you want to read it. So the thing I did here, first of all, I was very explicit in what I wanted. And I was very no nonsense, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to get, and I'm not going to tolerate anything else. This post is much more hardline and hard-assed than I actually am. And I did that on purpose too. I'm hopefully this post, the way it's written, is going to scare away a lot of the people that wouldn't measure up, right? They're going to be like, oh, I don't want to play for this guy. He sounds like a dick. He's asking way too much of me, which is good. I only want players that are going to play ball, right? The other thing I did is I put in specific questions, and I actually thought I had them hidden, but they're all in one spot. But I wanted to know, are you available on the optional day? What kind of character do you want to play? Tell me about your role-playing history, what games you've played, what games you like, what types of gameplay you like, right? So that's another test. First of all, reading the whole post and getting to that at the end is a test, because obviously if they don't read the whole thing, they're not even going to see that. And then actually answering all the questions is another test. It's a test of, did they read the whole post or not? Because if they can't be bothered to read my whole post, I can't be bothered to run a game for them. Did they comprehend my questions, remember my questions, and follow my directions and answer my questions and answer all of them, right? And I'm really glad I did this, because I got a lot of responses. And I will warn you, if you are going to run D&D, you will get a lot of responses, and you need to think more about how you're going to weed people out than if you're playing a more obscure game like Fate or something. You might not get so many. But it was really easy, because anybody who responded and didn't answer those questions, they were out. They were out. That was the first cut. It's like, did you read my question, or did you answer my questions? Nope, you're out. Okay. So from the, 20 plus responses I got, there's maybe, 6 or 7 or 8 that actually followed the directions and answered the questions. So instead of having to try to figure out who among 20 people I'm going to pick, it was, it was basically, okay, 1 or 2 of these 6 to 8 people I'm going to have to not pick. And that was all I had to decide, right? And then what I did is the ones that responded with, and responded correctly, I would then ask them follow-up questions and say, please answer these in a private message to me so I can keep track of you. And the follow-up questions were different. It was just, based on what they said. If I had a question about their character or anything, I would ask a follow-up question. And that was kind of a second test. Are they going to message me? Are they going to answer my follow-up question? And then I just kind of went back and forth with people through the private messages to kind of get a feel of them as a person, and then I just chose from there. Now, another step you could take, and that I kind of had in my back pocket if I needed it, is if you can't decide just based on private messages who you like, who you don't like, have them get together with you on Roll20 or on a Hangout or something, or on Skype, and have a 10-minute conversation with them. And then you can see, does their mic work? Does their camera work? What did they seem like personality-wise, right? And you can get a much better read on someone in a minute in a face-to-face or webcam-to-webcam conversation than you can in a whole, thread of email or private messages, right? So that's what I did. As Garrett notes, I had really good results. I got really good players, and it wasn't an accident. It was by design, and it was because I knew what I wanted. I was explicit about what I wanted, and I only accepted people that seemed to have what I wanted. And I was looking for 4 to 5 players. I ended up taking 6 because there were just 6 players that I thought seemed really good, and I couldn't find a reason to get rid of one of them. So I was like, what the hell? I'll take 6. One of them probably won't work out. And for a long time, they all worked out. I've now had 2 of those original players leave the group at different times. But for, I think, well over 6 months, they were all in it. So, yeah, I mean, not really a secret, just like the same thing. If you were hiring someone, same kind of thing. You have some kind of application process, and you use that to evaluate people based on parameters that you've decided on that are important to you, and you choose the people that best fit within those parameters. So I hope that's helpful to you, Garrett, and anyone else that's looking to find good players on Roll20. And I will also say, just as kind of an aside here, if you're thinking of doing what I'm doing as far as streaming your games or putting them on YouTube or whatever, there's a whole mess of other things to consider and worry about when you're doing that, right? Because normally when you're running or playing an RPG, all you got to worry about is the people at the table, is everybody having fun, and that's it. It's pretty simple, comparatively speaking. But when you're streaming or you're putting on YouTube, you also have to think of it as entertainment for other people watching. And so then there's other things you have to worry about, which is another reason that I was so picky about my players, is I really wanted players who would play ball. I really wanted players who would do what they were asked to do without complaint, and that were just easy to work with, So if I have to be like, hey, I really need you to mute your microphone when you're typing or something like that, they're cool with that. Like, they're easygoing people that'll understand that that's, part of what we're doing and part of kind of what you signed up for to be in a game that's being streamed. And I was about to say I was very lucky, but I don't think luck had anything to do with it. I think I got what I was looking for. And, you can't get what you want if you don't know what you want, right? So definitely know what you want, know what's important to you, and then come up with a post and an application process that's going to bring out those people. All right, so I have still not gotten to some of the stuff I wanted to talk about in GM 101, but this is getting long, so I'm going to wrap this up here. I have finally gotten through all the feedback that I've received, at least up to the point that I'm recording this. Chances are good by the time you hear this, I'll have more feedback. But if you have any questions or topic ideas for the GM 101 or for Game Master's Journey in general, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. All right, so I'm going to wrap up episode 78 of Game Master's Journey. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at GameMastersJourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Google plus Lex Starwalker. You can follow me on Twitter @Lex Starwalker. Please visit my website, starwalkerstudios.com. You can find the show notes for this and all the episodes there. You can also find my other podcasts there, including my new show, Expanse, the unofficial podcast, all about the new show on Sci-Fi and Space Channel, The Expanse, which if you are, I was going to say if you're into sci-fi or space opera, but you know what? If you're just into good TV, period, check it out. Even if you're not into sci-fi or space opera, it's a great show. It's fantastic. Only 4 episodes in, and I'm already hooked, and I do a podcast about it, so check that out. You can also, in the show notes, find links to my Patreon page if you'd like to become a patron. You can find links to my YouTube channel if you'd like to check out my actual plays, and all kinds of good stuff. So I hope you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.